Michael Sazin, the Parrot Wizard, and I'm visiting the Avian and Exotic Animal Clinic in Mesa near Phoenix, Arizona, here to see Dr. Todd Driggers to have some educational information to share with you. I'm Michael Sazin, the Parrot Wizard, and I'm here with Dr. Driggers of the Avian Exotic Animal Clinic in near Phoenix, Arizona. And we'd like to talk to you about some general topics about parrot care and veterinary care. Dr. Driggers is a fantastic veterinarian. He takes care of the flock at Ginger's Parrots Rescue, and he's here to share some insights and tips about parrot care with you.
Thank you very much. So one of the probably overlooked areas that we see are the parrots that we keep together for social purposes, or even sometimes the inadvertent exposure of parrots together. And one of the big things that we see is when big birds and little birds get together. So it's not necessarily the size of the bird, but the size of the beak. So when birds have markedly different sized beaks, obviously they have different tools for hurting or harming each other. One of the big things that we look at is, it's been said, never bring a knife to a gunfight. And if you have a bird with a really big beak, the amount of trauma that they can cause acutely is very, very quick, rapid, and severe. So I have a collection of small beaks where birds were kept with bigger birds, things like an Amazon and a conure, or an African gray and a conure. Green cheeks tend to be some of the birds that we see most frequently because their beak is so small and they're so placid, friendly, and gregarious. Sometimes they are a little more trusting than they really should be. Essentially, when a bird's beak gets traumatized, usually the upper beak can be ripped off totally. So ripped off from a traumatic amputation of the bone. It can be ripped off at the nasal sinus, so I've had bites through sinuses as well. And really, we're talking about knowledge of just beak sizes and the potential. And the goal here is to probably just make people aware that those, depending on the beak size, they probably should not be kept together or have access to each other. That being said, we know that mistakes happen. We know that occasionally the door gets left open. We know that sometimes a cage gets knocked over and the bird gets loose and whatnot. So, but the generalized awareness should be that you shouldn't keep a big beaked bird with a small beaked bird because the potential is so severe.
Do these things usually happen when the birds are just out in the room with the owner playing together? Are they being caged together? What is the typical circumstance that brings this kind of thing out?
It's usually a big bird gets out of the cage and the little bird may be in its cage, or the big bird lands on the little bird's cage and the little bird goes up to bite the bird, and then the little bird can just have its beak amputated even through the cage when it goes to fend the bird off of the cage. But it can happen in a variety of scenarios. I've even had birds lose their beak from, for instance, flying right next to a ceiling fan and get their beak completely smacked off, right off of their face. So it's traumatically amputated. The same as with another bird's beak. So many times if that germinal tissue is left, if that germinal epithelium is left, you'll get a keratin overgrowth, and the part of the beak will grow back. The bone just doesn't grow back, the keratin will. So the first aid treatment for that, if you do get a bird with a traumatic amputation, as long as it's not completely amputated from the bone, bring the bird's beak in with you to the veterinarian, and we can stop the hemorrhage, dry that tissue out, and potentially glue it back on. It's possible that the bone will then re-heal like a fracture, and it's like a bone graft. And if that's the case, that's the best case scenario, and you can get the keratin, the fingernail-like portion that grows back over the top of the bone, and get a relatively normal shaped beak that just needs
probably more frequent assessment from your veterinarian.
What other body parts are often at risk from bird on bird injuries?
Bird on bird injuries, every body part. And so we have everything from bites through the neck to lower beak, traumatic splits, to toe amputations, to leg fractures, to wing fractures. One of the big things that we see if birds are fighting or one bird gets into another bird's cage, some birds flip over on their back and just grab them with their feet, and they can get their toes chewed up pretty good. And again, fractures of any of those things in addition to just general trauma.
Does this usually happen between birds that are enemies or birds that are friends with each other?
It's usually birds that are known to be territorial, aggressive, or seasonal times where a bird may be sexually aggressive, pair bonding, or pair mated, and you don't realize that they've kicked into that season. So it's really important to know your birds, regardless of when it might commonly happen. Know that springtime's probably going to be a time when there's increased sexual pressure, and they may be doing a pair bond guarding type situation where they have to feel like they're defending their mate, and that's simply what they do.
So besides bird on bird, what other animals can cause injuries to pet companion parrots?
Well, we definitely see dog bites. We definitely see cat bites, but far and away, dogs are probably the biggest thing that create problems for birds. So a bird can be totally flighted and caught by a cat. A bird can be totally flighted, hit into the wall, and then the dog grabs them when they fall down from the wall. A bird can be clipped totally, and they're totally vulnerable all the time, so they have no opportunity to get away. And a bird can be partially clipped and fly much slower, and therefore be a victim, particularly to a cat. So there's no hard, fast rules, except knowing that anytime you have a carnivore and anytime you have a prey animal like a bird might be, the potential for negative consequences and negative interactions are definitely very high.
What if the dog is friendly and doesn't show much interest to the bird?
Friendly dogs and even playful dogs can still kill birds. In general, we can sort of see what dogs are thinking by the way that they interact. It's hard to know what birds are thinking, and I have some birds that I feel, and then that also show me that they're incredibly scared, but they may act aggressive, and the fear-based stuff is still immunosuppressive for them. It's not good for their health. It causes them to release a bunch of steroids and be a lot more susceptible to infections, in addition to feather destructive behavior associated with not being able to control the fact that there's a predator around. So birds see, I think, things that we can't necessarily see, which is, hey, this animal really wants to eat me. They feel it. So in general, no matter if you feel like the dog is a threat or the cat is or is not a threat, I tend to make the assumption that anytime you have an animal that eats what it is, that there could definitely be a problem, either physical and or psychological.
What about wing clipping? Do you recommend owners to wing clip their parrots if they have cats or dogs in the house for their safety?
So wing clipping definitely causes the animal to have, or the bird to have, less anti-predatory skills. So if you've got a dog and you've got a bird that's clipped, it's going to fall and become, or potentially become, a victim. If you've got a cat and the bird can't fly away from it, it's going to basically fall on the ground and be potentially a victim. So if it can fly, at least it has the chance to get away, whereas if it can't fly and you've got a predatory carnivore in your household that you so dearly love, you just need to realize that that is a distinct possibility.
So are you saying that you see more predator dog-cat attacks on birds that are clipped than flighted?
I would think that that is a good logical conclusion, and why I don't keep statistics of that. I think overall I could probably say that relatively easy. I guess the exceptions would be if you have a very predatory bird-oriented dog like a pointer and it's flighted. It's going to be incited by the flight. It's going to be basically instinctually energized to catch the bird in some way. But by and large, for most people's pets, if the bird has less skills, it stands to reason that it's going to be more of a victim.
Are there any other pets that can be a threat to someone's companion parrot?
And basically, any carnivore is a lot more predisposed to attacking a parrot. I have seen parrots get attacked by ferrets and present for emergency situations. I've seen parrots that get attacked by rats and present and for emergency situations. But if you have a carnivore, you need to look at it across the board, as you have a flying, very expensive, beloved chicken that carnivore is going to eat.
What about other pets like reptiles or fish? Can they pose any kind of threat to parrots?
I certainly haven't seen any fish eat any birds.
But have you ever encountered birds that drowned in a fish aquarium that's open?
No. I've had birds drown in toilets, but I have not had any fly into an aquarium. That being said, it's known that long-necked turtles from Africa will eat birds that are in the ponds as the ponds regress. I have not experienced any clients that let their reptiles roam freely to get access to birds, but monitors definitely could eat a bird. Snakes could definitely eat a bird. Fortunately, most people don't free roam their reptiles. They're in some sort of enclosure for both the protection of other pets as well as the protection of the reptile itself.
What other household hazards land a bird at the vet most often?
Household hazards, probably we definitely still see some intoxicosis associated with Teflon or ovens that are being cleaned, the non-stick or self-cleaning ovens, any of that type of stuff we still see issues with. Any fumes, we have and we see an increasing amount of chickens as pets now, and one of the big things that we see is, if a client builds a coop or they're building a fence, and you have some people that are building it that are less, maybe cautious about screws or nuts or bolts or anything like that falling out of their pouches, they'll just let it go. The chicken will pick it up, and they get zinc toxicity associated with that. So any farm or barnyard type of situation. One of the big things that we do to prevent that is we have a big long magnet on wheels that has a nice handle, and you can walk around your entire yard like you're mowing it, but with this magnet, and you'll find that those metals get picked up.
Zinc toxicity in parrots, is that still prevalent?
So zinc toxicity in parrots does occur. And so does lead. Lead and zinc probably occur in equal portions. So lead-based glass types of paintings, which we have an example of here just for our clients' information, are not uncommon. Screen tops, oftentimes with little babies, if you put a screen top on them, those screens do have some zinc in them. Anything that is galvanized definitely can have zinc in them. Some parrots run higher levels of zinc in their blood. So like cockatoos, for instance, are about 2.5 parts per million, slightly less. And other parrots, as long as they're less than 2, they're not considered toxic. Zinc is a part of their body and in the environment, but toxic levels occur between probably 2.5 and 3.
And what kind of things should owners try to keep away from their parrots? What are the sources of zinc that you find?
Well, cheap toys for sure. Toys made in China. Stainless steel is probably a better source of holding your toys together from a toxic standpoint than are some of the cheaper alternatives that are on little chains and tiny little things. Sometimes the bells inside of a ball, particularly for like dogs and cats, if you're given birds, dog and cat toys, will have some zinc in them as well. And certainly common things that you might wear, like buttons or zippers or things to that effect, may have a degree of zinc on them.
And besides the hazards they can ingest or breathe, what other hazards might you find around the house that land parrots at the vet?
Well, just trauma in general. So flying into windows, flying into mirrors, doors, open doors or doors that are closing when the time the parrot is trying to go through. So just general trauma, so fractures. Kids that are super excitable around the bird falls to the ground. Sometimes we see them get stepped upon. So trauma is by far and away, even more probably so than toxicity, as far as trauma. So ceiling fans are another thing. So most people that have free-flighted birds either choose not to have ceiling fans at all, or have ceiling fans that have cages over the top of them that protect the bird from flying in or on or around them.
Great. So Dr. Driggers, what do you have to say about avian nutrition? First, more broadly, what is a better source of a balanced diet for parrots?
So when you say for parrots, broadly speaking, there are 300 something parrots in the wild, and some of them are from deserts, and some of them are from tropical rainforests, and some of them are from coniferous forest. So parrots in general is not a parrot. So they all widely range with respect to the nutritional needs. Much of the nutrition that is out there is really based upon chicken nutrition. So essentially we know sort of how to make birds not die from fatty liver. We may not be meeting the nutritional needs of many birds even with our best attempts to simulate what we think or believe that they should eat. But essentially science hasn't given us many of the answers that we need because we lack observations of wild parrots over a long period of time in front of birds.
So let's start with what is harmful to parrots and we should exclude first of all.
So that being said, I will tell you that the origin of sunflower seeds in birds' diets has to do with in the 1500s when the English and the Dutch were sailing around the ocean blues, and they were picking up parrots, and they were picking up spices and goods and golds and metals and doing scientific endeavors everywhere. They apparently came to the United States and they traded with the American Indians for sunflower seeds. They brought them back to England, and when they would have their garden and tea parties, and they would also have parrots there simultaneously, one thing that the parrots would always eat would be sunflower seeds. So the origin of sunflower seeds in the diet has to do more with history rather than real natural history, so man-made history. So with respect to fatty foods and what we have taken or assumed to be normal, it's not normal at all. It's a man-made type of thing. I will say that the Carolina parakeet would have been one of the only parrots that may have access to natural sunflower seeds, and it is extinct. So not that that was the only reason, but the fact is that sunflower seeds are unnatural. So high-fat foods probably work really well for parrots that are fully active and flighted and moving around a rainforest or around a deciduous forest, but generally speaking, the cage, the captivity, the confinement, and the lack of freedom and exercise that many parrots have in a captive environment don't lend themselves to high-fat diets without them developing significant medical or metabolic issues associated with atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries and cardiac types of diseases.
So if someone visits a bird store and they're faced with a choice of 30 different bags of bird food, what might be the order of least to most preferable?
The biggest thing that I would say is the customer needs to be aware that sometimes it's not a matter of what, but how much, and what their relative activity level is. You know, a trained athlete, they can eat a lot more than a couch potato type person or somebody who's not going to have high amounts of metabolic activity. So it's not a matter for me of what, but listening, talking, educating, and hearing what the lifestyle of that particular parrot's going to be. Generally speaking, so there's no such thing as pellets in the wild either, just as much as there's no such thing as sunflower seeds for most parrots in the wild. So that being said, corn-based pellets are probably again a chicken-based assumption about what carbohydrates can we get into the animal, or really what binding agents can we use to make sure that enough protein and calcium and all the things that go into a pellet that go into an extruded pellet keep it bound up together. So with diet, I do use pellets as a primary source of food. I do think sprouting seeds, I do think fresh fruits and vegetables are an important thing, and how you offer and what you offer are two separate nutritional questions, because one of them involves enrichment. So we don't really tend to tell people, we tell people feed what they will be reticent to eat in a bowl. That way you make it easier, and feed what they would be likely to be motivated to eat in some sort of either foraging toy, in some sort of a physical way to interact with the bird and positively reinforce it. Not to evade the question totally about pellets, as a veterinarian, the first pellet that I carry is Harrison's. It's an organic diet. It's readily available, and the parrots tend to accept it very well. Not all parrots have the same taste. Zupreme is also a diet that a lot of parrots will eat. It's the highest amount of sugar. It is for me a transitional pellet. So if I have a bird that won't eat any other type of pellet, the sugar diets, the sugar that is in that does tend to stimulate them to eat better and transition to pellets, and then you can walk them back to whatever pellet that you find and feel is most ideally suited for them individually. Pellets can be free choice. It's usually the seed stuffs that end up having to be limited because most parrots don't eat so many pellets just due to personal preference or availability. So I really like Lefever's pellets. I really also like Rowdy Bush pellets, but our mainstay, what we sell the most of, is Harrison's. Lefever's pellets are nice, and they also spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to educate and help veterinarians become veterinarians, become better veterinarians. And that's across the exotic animal community, not just with birds, but with other pets and species.
How can bird owners assess the health and value of the food that they're feeding? First of all, themselves at home, and what can a veterinarian look for to help them realize if what they're feeding has been good for the bird or not?
So just generally speaking, nutrition, like with us, sometimes you make mistakes when you're young, and you eat a little too much at McDonald's, and you can get by with a lot of bad nutrition early, but early health in older health, is not necessarily synonymous. So what happens with them young affects them when they're old. So eating at McDonald's is not such a good thing for me when I was 5, because hey, now I might have heart issues associated with that. So parrots being long-lived, you don't necessarily see immediate things, so it's more of a marathon than a sprint. But essentially what we tend to do is blood work annually or every other year at the very least, and we assess trends. And when we assess trends, we either have trends being our friends or trends being our enemies. And if our trends are our enemies, we're going to make dietary recommendations based upon what those trends are. So recently I had a bird that last year had a triglyceride level of 7,800. Normal triglycerides are less than 70. We put it on a diet. We restricted a lot of the food that it had access to. And really the biggest thing that we did was educated the owners and say, you know, the outcome of doing what you're doing, unfortunately your bird's going to be dead in a year and a half. So we've monitored that bird throughout the year, and it had a 7,800 triglycerides. Now it has a triglycerides of 790, almost 800. So it's a 10-fold decrease. So that bird definitely has some internal metabolic issues. Not every bird is like the other. So you have some, like humans, that handle high-fat foods better, and some that don't. This particular bird doesn't handle any high-fat food very well. So every bird is an individual. Every bird owner should have a relationship with their avian veterinarian who has the potential for educating and moving them on with that individual. So no matter what I say, your local veterinarian should be someone that you keep in contact with at least once a year to get a physical exam, to get some blood, and to thoroughly assess and reassess if the husbandry that you're performing is consistent with and lifestyle is consistent with a long life, or at least what your goals are. You can do things very badly and your bird can have the life of James Dean, you know, live hard and die young. And if that's your goal, that's your goal. Nobody can assess or tell you to do otherwise. But if your goal is to have a parrot that's well behaved, that is a good pet over a long period of time, assessing the nutrition annually and doing good behavioral stuff, having good behavioral interactions is always a good thing. Most of the veterinarians that you see that are going to do exotic animal medicine, they hope to be smarter every year, and hopefully we can impart new things to you every year. So if you're not doing annual exams with your birds, we want to help you with your husbandry, we want to help you with the nutrition, we want to help you also make sure that we're ruling out medical things, or ruling in medical things, and if we do rule things in, we at least can then treat early rather than wait late when there's a true emergency that we can do very little about.
So if an owner is feeding their bird very healthy and they believe that they're feeding the best diet to their bird, why should they bother visiting a veterinarian? And how can they know, if their bird is actually benefiting from what they're feeding?
So as we previously stated, all birds are different metabolically, and if every 300 or 400 species of parrots had a known ideal diet in the wild that was then perfectly duplicated by a pellet or what exactly the owner did in the wild, then you might be able to make that assumption, but you really can't make that assumption because the science doesn't back what the ideal diet is for any single parrot.
Have you seen birds that are being fed a very healthy diet come in and actually show problems that they are not quite as healthy as people
I
might
have
think?
had an Amazon, again with a perch potato lifestyle, that would way overeat a very high quality pellet and had issues just because it overate the pellet. So absolutely, and again, it's not just what they eat, but it's how much they exercise and what their individual metabolism is.
And how do you make sure they get the right amount?
The food volume is kind of a big thing, and we take it very seriously here at the Avian Exotic Animal Clinic. So we at every well visit with a bird, new birds particularly, we give them a measuring cup, and we have a tablespoon, teaspoon, half teaspoon, and a quarter of a teaspoon. So we look at the bird, we weigh the bird, and we look at the caloric density of the food that they may be feeding, and we make specific recommendations on food volume. Again, most people don't undernourish their birds, they overnourish their birds, and they undernutrition the birds. So what that specifically means is they're feeding things that are high fat, and not unlike humans, birds will pick the things that taste best, not necessarily the things that are most nutritional. So if we volume restrict food, we have the unique abilities to positively interact with them when we are showing them behavioral things. If we overfeed them, usually clients lose relationship with the bird, because food is a positive motivator for many, many birds. So in time, overfeeding not only causes medical issues with the birds, but it definitely causes behavioral issues and clients to become bored with their bird because it stops interacting with them simply due to overfeeding.
So you're saying that behavior can be affected by what and how much you feed a bird?
Behavior can definitely be affected by what and how much you feed a bird. And the best way to train a bird is to have it be positively reinforced. And if you're giving away all your reinforcers for free, then they grow independent of you, like a teenager with a car.
What are the benefits, both mental and physical, to a parrot of being trained and having a behavioral relationship with their owner?
Well, the relationship with the owners and how they interact with them is displacement activity for the relationships and the social situations that they may acquire in the wild. So it is paramount that they have social interactions that are meaningful to them living a life, rather than living a life in solitary in their cage. It's having a relationship with that particular bird and knowing that individual bird's characteristics that really make you highlight its strengths and compensate for the weaknesses that it might have. But socially and mentally and physically, it has profound impacts to have a relationship with somebody.
Do you have anything to share about bird identification, like microchips and leg bands?
Leg bands tend to break birds' legs, so we are not fond of leg bands. It's not something natural that they are hatched with, so the propensity for them to be injured with leg bands are high. Birds that are, free-flighted, obviously, one of the big things is if they did get loose, you want to have some way to physically identify them, and microchips offer that. So there's nanomicrochips or mini microchips that can be inserted that are smaller than a grain of rice that get put into the breast muscle, the lateral breast muscle, or the pectoral muscle, that help people permanently identify their birds.
So thank you very much, Dr. Driggers, for this informative talk. I was very happy to get to see you here again in the Phoenix area, and hope to come and visit you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for visiting. Thank you for all that you're doing for Ginger's Parrot Rescue and from the Parrot Wizard, as you're creating a venue for people to really think and reconsider about things that they haven't considered before. So the Avian Exotic Animal Clinic is really happy to be a part of that and to try to educate people that subscribe to anything that you're doing at the Parrot Wizard.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.